Hello and welcome to the Talk Villa podcast. I'm your host Ep1, and as this is the very first podcast, I'd like to start by thanking you for giving it a listen. Whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or wherever else it may be, please do subscribe, give the episode a like and leave a review if you like what you hear. The pod will of course evolve, expand and improve over time, as I hope I'll keep a few of you interested in continuing to listen. But for the first episode, we're of course looking back at the Premier League season opener against Newcastle United this past Saturday, which of course ended in a goalless draw. Certainly wasn't a classic, but as I will do with every single game this season, I'll pick out 5 key talking points to discuss in further depth. The first of which in this one is that I felt that it was a decent point given how the game played out. Villa were obviously far from our best in this game, which was disappointing given the excitement and the build-up to a new season. But the way the game progressed, I think Unai Emery and the players will likely be content with a point at the end of it. Newcastle had their early chances and they had the chances throughout the game. Ezri Konsa's dismissal complicated things in the final half hour or so. But for the most part, I think the defensive display was excellent, kept a clean sheet and ensured we at least took a point away from the game. Clearly, there's going to be a need for improvement in our attacking play, as I thought we lacked quality in the final third, but particularly in our ability to progress the ball through the midfield. There was no rhythm, there was no technical quality, there was no composure, consistently surrendered possession cheaply. So I think that's going to be a major area in which we need to improve. But having said that, given how poor we were, being down to 10 men in the second half, I think it's a draw that we'll accept and hopefully build on. It is now 19 games unbeaten at Fortress Villa Park, which is a new club record, and so that's a big positive to take away from it. The second point is whether or not we miss Pau Torres' ability to build out from the back. Tyrone Mings obviously gives us important defensive solidity in defence. I think he's a massive physical presence. He's very good at organising the back line. He shows leadership, and it's questionable as to whether or not we would have even kept a clean sheet or gone on to get a draw out of the game if he wasn't on the pitch. But I do feel as though we do miss the composure and distribution of Pau in games like this, where we had nowhere to ultimately play out from the back. Credit to Newcastle and particularly to Eddie Howe for the way they set up. I think they got it spot on, led by Anthony Gordon, but also their midfield. They often refused to sort of engage and press our defenders and Marco Bizot. They patiently waited for the ball to progress into our midfield to Onana and Kamara, or out to the fullbacks Cash and Dean. And that's when they pounced, really applied the pressure and press, and Villa subsequently consistently surrendered possession really cheaply throughout. I think it's questionable as to whether or not we'd have even kept a clean sheet and been in the game had Mings not been on the pitch, because he does add that steeliness at the back, but Pau's passing quality was a notable absent in this one. On a similar note to that, it's also questionable Tielemans' role and position in this game. I think we really missed his composure, technical ability as our orchestrator, to have that influence and effect in pulling the strings in the midfield pivot. As I say, he is our orchestrator when he's deployed in that role, and I thought we struggled to play with any rhythm and we were really poor possession as we progressed through the midfield and up the pitch. And so I think we'll see Emery move him back into that role next weekend at Brentford. We've obviously got to fill the void that's left behind now by Konsa's suspension, so Boubacar Kamara dropping back into defence and Tielemans and Onana playing in the pivot. I think that has got to be where Tielemans operates moving forward. It's not a criticism of the starting lineup, as my prediction was exactly the same in terms of how we might set up for this game, particularly considering the threat that Newcastle carry. But in hindsight, definitely feel as though we lacked that quality in that area of the pitch, and it hurt us as the game played out, as we really struggled to play with any rhythm or quality in midfield. On a more positive note, I think Marco Bizot enjoyed a fantastic debut. He was one of the main positives of the game. He produced a number of fine saves, including a hugely important one early on to deny Anthony Elanga. But aside from the stops, I thought he commanded his area really well throughout. And it built on the positive pre-season that he ultimately had. He's proving to be a really capable and solid backup option between the posts to Emiliano Martinez. I don't agree with all the slander that I'm seeing on social media to Robin Olsen. Yes, he was unconvincing and he had his flaws. But as Emery and a lot of his teammates constantly reminded us, he was a valued member of the dressing room, experienced goalkeeper. But it's also fair to say that we've massively upgraded in that department, it seems. And Bizot looks like a really capable backup option. It should also put some more pressure on Martinez. He is obviously going to be our number one choice between the posts, but having that level of competition and quality behind him from Bizot hopefully pushes him on to play at a higher level on a more consistent basis this season as well. But speaking of Bizot, let's have a listen as to what he had to say about his performance on his Villa debut as he spoke to Villa TV after the game.
Well, to be honest, first of all, it was it's always special. It's always little tension to make your debut and to get your first match at home. So that was in the first minutes. It was I had to feel it a little bit, look at it, and after a few moments, few minutes, it was absolutely amazing. Stadium was fantastic. The atmosphere was good. So I enjoyed it.
And a couple of good saves in front of the whole 10 for you.
Yeah, luckily I could keep the zero, and I did whatever I could for the team and for everybody. So that's what my role is.
That was Marco Bizot speaking to Villa TV. Moving on to the next point, there was also a question mark around whether or not Emery was right to limit his substitutions or whether or not more changes were needed in the latter stages of the game. Now, given the situation we were in for the last half hour or so with Konsa's dismissal, it was understandable why Emery wanted to sort of maintain our shape and organisation with the players he had on the pitch, as I think we were performing well from a defensive perspective to hold out for the draw. However, I did feel as though the introduction of Daniel Marlin in the 84th minute perhaps could have come a little bit earlier. He offered more energy on the pitch, but also it got the Villa crowd sort of reinvigorated as well. He threatened on the counter-attack, gave us a bit more urgency and intensity and energy up the pitch to close down the Newcastle defenders as well. But as I say, I think the balance was good up to that point, so it's understandable why Emery didn't want to change things and tweak stuff. But whether it was Marlon being introduced a little bit earlier, or the likes of Ian Matson and Emiliano Buendia being given a part to play, those fresh legs in the closing minutes to try and offer more of a threat on the counter and to sort of see out the game more convincingly was perhaps another area where we might have been more proactive. Emery also spoke to Villa TV after the game. Let's have a little listen to what he had to say.
Good afternoon. Grateful for our supporters. Full stadium. The first match we were everybody motivated and excited to start here winning. Of course, this is the 22 match, not losing at home, and is very good as well to achieve it. But lost like we did today, 2 points at home, maybe it's not the best. I am not happy only achieving 1 point, but how was going the match and against the opponent we have. Of course, I had to accept it at the end of the match. The first half we played, I think, not dominating the match like we planned. We were not getting some duel beating them. Defensively, even we were not stopping them. They were playing a lot of long ball, second action, and they are so strong player, a strong team doing it. And we didn't concede a lot, but very good chances they had, and our goalkeeper saved it fantastic, Marco. And the second half, we changed a little bit, and we tried as well to do more passes, some position on the field as well. Tactically, we corrected. And I think we started very well the first 10-15 minutes. We were dominating more. We were in attacking third more time than the first half. We were even with the fullback, sometimes we were getting higher. So in that moment, I was very, very confident to win the match. But after the red card, again, the match changed completely. And of course, in my mind was we have to try to get one transition and to score 1 goal to win. But firstly, we needed defensively to set a high commitment everybody in his task, and they did it. And of course, we didn't concede a lot of chance. More or less, we were defending out of corners, a lot of faults. And I think we had to accept this result.
So that was Unai Emery speaking to Villa TV after the game, sharing his thoughts on our draw with Newcastle United. In other news this week, we bid farewell to Jacob Ramsey, one of our own, nearly 20 years at the club, coming through our youth system, going on to establish himself as a key figure in the first team squad. It's obviously sad to see him go from a sentimental perspective. Ramsey had a special connection with the supporters, and we're obviously all rooting for him to fulfil his potential with us and kick on and take his game to the next level. Unfortunately, that's now not going to happen. He secured an initial £39 million move to Newcastle United, which could rise to £44 million with add-ons. There's 2 angles to look at this, in my opinion. I think from one, you have to say that it's good business from Villa to cash in and help balance our books with our ongoing financial issues and concerns. As I said, injuries and a lack of consistency never really saw Ramsey kick on to that next level. I thought he showed real promise that he was capable of doing so when Emery initially came in, but badly affected by injuries, couldn't really get his form going on a consistent basis last season, and I think that's had a massive impact on this decision that's ultimately been reached by the club. There were reports that suggested that the club had made contract offers to him to extend his stay. Apparently he'd been locked in talks for some time, but with no agreement reached. We have to wish him well, and we move forward without him. I think what is also clear at this stage is that it's a difficult one to take internally. Tyrone Mings, John McGinn and Damian Vidagani have expressed their disappointment and frustration with the situation. Obviously it's a personal thing as well for them. They have to say goodbye to a long-time teammate, friend and a key figure within the club. But go on to more detail in terms of the financial restraints that have dogged our summer. But sad to see Ramsey go. Hopefully it proves to be sensible business from Villa in the long term. So as I mentioned, it has been another week dominated by talk of financial restraints. Endless talk surrounding concerns off the pitch, which continue to dominate headlines. And we even had Emery, Monchi and Vidagani sit down with TNT Sports ahead of the game this weekend to discuss the situation. Vidagani even used one of my tweets from last year to reiterate the points he made on the situation 12 months ago. And it has to be said that it's an ongoing problem that Villa are going to have to deal with. We addressed our PSR issues earlier in the summer by selling the women's team. We did enter into a settlement agreement with UEFA over the next 3 years, which will continue to limit our spending power, both on transfer fees and wages, as ultimately we have to comply with the regulations to avoid further breaches and subsequent sanctions. The rules as they are obviously anti-competition, not fit for purpose, as although you can argue that they were set out with an admirable objective of helping to avoid clubs going bust, they are also subsequently limiting ambitious clubs who are prepared to spend within their means, such as ourselves, and they ultimately protect the status quo of the established sides with historical success and higher global revenues. It's effectively a closed shop for those elite sides who continue to profit and benefit, and as we've seen in the summer transfer window, that gap continues to grow bigger as they're in a position to spend more lavishly on big signings, whereas Villa are stuck in this perennial pinch every year that we have to prolong this dance of sacrificing key individuals to afford new reinforcements. As I say, there are two angles to it. That is the harsh reality, and hopefully something can be done to challenge those rules in the long term. But ultimately the rules are what they are. The Villa hierarchy have entered into an agreement with UEFA that they believe is achievable and is in the best interest of the club. The focus for us has to be on getting behind Emery and the players who remain committed to delivering progression and success despite these unfair financial restraints we face, and we have to believe in that strategy and project to deliver for short-term and long-term results. I think in Unai, Monchi, Vidagani, Nassif Sawiris and Wes Edens, we have to trust them. They've done an unbelievable job up to this point, even though they have their detractors, and I do feel as though they've got the best interests of the club at heart, and they're doing the best they can in a very difficult situation. So that's all from the first episode of the Talk Villa podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I would like to hear from you and your thoughts on the game this past weekend, on Jacob Ramsey's departure, and our ongoing financial restrictions and issues. Please leave your comments and questions wherever you're listening. Give the podcast a positive review if you've enjoyed what you've listened to. And I'll redo everything in next week's podcast, where I'll be back to discuss, hopefully, 3 points against Brentford. Thanks for listening, and up the Villa.